Hello everyone, I'm Arali, and today I want to talk about my next Elite Specialization speculation for Guild Wars End of Dragons. This episode is pretty special to me because I'm going to be talking about the Revenant. The Elite Specialization that I gave him is going to be the Ritualist. Now the Ritualist was my favorite class in Guild Wars 1, and I thought it was a very unique class. Talking about, different MMOs, I think the Ritualist was something that you didn't really see in other games, and it had like this really nice flair to it, and it was just a really interesting class. So that's what this is going to be about. The weapon that I gave the Ritualist is going to be the Scepter and Focus. Now I know a lot of people have been asking for a greatsword on the Revenant, but I think we have a lot of classes that use the greatsword, and I think that I'm not really excited about the idea of using a greatsword on a Revenant, and I wouldn't know, would it be a long range weapon or would it be short range? I don't know. I was never really excited about that idea. I'm not a huge fan of the greatsword as it is, and I think a lot of classes can use it, and I don't think we need that anymore. But the reason I gave the Scepter and Focus to the Revenant was because it doesn't really have a magical weapon. Long range we're already lacking as it is, and I think having something that is magical and long range, that's what I kind of miss, I feel like, for the Revenant, because the Revenant is such a magical class, but we don't really get a magical weapon. And, I specifically think about the Trident that was added a while back and the skills that it got in there, and those were actually really cool skills, and they're very interesting, and that made me realize how much I miss having a magical weapon for the Revenant, on land or whatever. So I really think that that's something that goes with the Ritualist too as a specialization. So, and of course the weapon skills would be a lot of lightning damage. So in Guild Wars 1, the Ritualist dealt a lot of lightning damage. Most of the damage types were lightning damage, but of course it was like the teal colored lightning that you got, because that was the whole flair of the Ritualist, and maybe also some healing in there. The Ritualists are predominantly used as healers nowadays, and I think that would be interesting to just kind of have some healing on there too. We don't have much of healing weapons on the Revenant. We have the staff, but nothing that's like long range. Again, we're lacking in long range as it is, so I think, just one particular skill that I'm thinking of that could be like a 3 or 5 skill is Spirit Rift, which was the skill that you used, and after 3 seconds it would just explode on the enemy or on the spot where the enemy stood, and it does like a ton of damage to all the enemies around it, and also inflicts this condition called cracked armor. And that was I love that skill, but it was never really that useful because enemies would just die really fast. But I think in Guild Wars 2 that would actually work really well, because we have lots of skills that do damage after a little while. I'm thinking of like Elementalist Meteor Shower, and you might not actually get hit, so there's actually a long duration of time that you don't get hit, but if you get hit, it's a ton of damage, and I think Spirit Rift would be really nice for that. Now, going into utility skills, I kind of thought about the Revenant is unique, of course, in the way that it has its specializations and its skills, because they're based off of a themed character. Now we're looking at, for example, Ventari has the tablet skills, and they all work under the tablet, and you have Glint, which uses her facets, which, was a thing from Guild Wars 1, and it's a nice callback, and you get Kala with her spirits, you summon the whole warband and stuff, so those works, but there's certain ones that don't actually have like a specific theme. You look at Jalis, and Jalis uses chains and builds a road and uses floating hammers, and it just doesn't really go together as like a particular theme. It's just based off of this character. So the Ritualist is going to be based off of Master Togo. Master Togo being the Ritualist, one of the main characters from Factions, the first expansion for Guild Wars, or not expansion, they were standalone campaigns, but he was a protagonist in that story for factions for Cantha, where we're going back to, and he was like the first ritualist you really get to see. And you know, he, spoiler of you know, if you haven't played factions, but he dies at the end of factions and becomes a spirit, and he joins the heroes. And you know, in Cantha they worship the heroes and stuff. So I think being able to invoke Master Togo would be really interesting. Of course, there would be, because we always get dialogue options and stuff like that, you know, like the idle dialogues that you get from all your legends and stuff. There's just a ton of stuff that they can do with it. You know, there's so much, especially going into Cantha. I think for ArenaNet, this would be a really, really smart move to do a ritualist specialization. If it's not on the Revenant, on some other class, but I think it would be a smart move for ArenaNet to do this and use Togo for that, because Togo was just such a prominent character for Cantha, and I think he would be just perfect. So going right into the utility skills, now I've thought, like I said, there is mix match specializations like Jalis, and you also have Shiro Tagachi. I kind of thought of like 3 different utility skills that they could have that kind of just hit different things the ritualists used to do. So one thing is, I thought of maybe ashes. So ashes used to be skills that you use the skill and you get this urn in your hand that you hold, and while you're holding it you get an effect, and then if you drop the ashes you get another effect. Like as the urn explodes you get another effect. So what I thought of ashes would be, maybe you could have one ashes skill and it's almost like a kit for the engineer. So you would invoke these ashes and maybe get a few skills, 3 to 5 skills or something that you could use to just, they're got like really strong skills, that attack skills, but you only have the ashes for a certain amount of time, and when they drop you get, you know, some kind of damage effect maybe around you, or maybe a healing effect around you, or something that gives you boons or something. But that would be one skill. And then another skill that I thought was maybe a spirit weapon. Now spirit weapons in Guild Wars 1, they were like enchantments that you used on a character. So they were like kind of how you would use something helpful like invoke boons or something. But they were kind of unique because they transformed your weapon into something. So you knew when you had a weapon skill on you because your weapon would look different. It would be this like white bony looking weapon that has like this teal mist coming off of it. And that was the spirit weapon, and they usually either had a duration or you could use a certain amount of attacks. And so this is going to be the same thing, but it's a little twist on it because it would be affecting more than just one ally. This would affect a lot of different allies all around you, and you know, up to like 5, like a regular, maybe like a shout or something. And it only affects their auto attacks. So, because that's pretty much what weapon skills were about. It was about attack skills that you use. So I think having it maybe just work on auto attacks, so you get the specific effect on you that lasts for a certain amount of time or a certain amount of attacks, and it only works on auto attacks, would be really cool, I think. And they kind of hinted at something like this with the 15th anniversary skills that they added, because it kind of, the skill was the weapon of 3 forges, and it actually affects all non-spirit allies in earshot around you, and it transforms all their weapons into a random weapon skill. So it gives them random weapon skills. So they at some point thought about this and kind of thought that that would be an interesting idea. So I think kind of taking that to the next level and actually adding it into Guild Wars 2 would be interesting. And then another skill that I thought of would be maybe having a spirit that you summon, but having it be a healing spirit. Like I said before, ritualists a lot of them are healing ritualists. And there were certain skills like recuperation or rejuvenation or even preservation, which was an elite skill that wasn't very good but had a really cool icon. And you know, those were healing spirits. So we already have spirits with Kala, but most of them don't really do healing. I mean, the elite kind of deals with siphoning health and stuff like that, but you don't really have like a healing aspect to it. So I think having something that just pops out healing every second for allies around would be really nice. And so those would be like the 3 skills, and I'm gonna get into the mechanic in a minute because it actually has to do with those skills, maybe even the elite skill. I'm not exactly sure of that. The elite skill, of course, being Signet of Spirits, which would summon the 3 spirits just like in Guild Wars 1. Now that's a skill that's used in Guild Wars 1 very, very often, and a lot of builds are based off of this because it summons 3 spirits, and a lot of Ritualist skills have to deal with spirits and things like that. So I think having that as an elite skill would be really cool. Kind of, I know a lot of people have been asking for spirits, and in No Kala with the Renegade we already get spirits and stuff like that, but I think this would be like almost like a workaround for that, because it's not like you would need an army of spirits. I think just having Signative spirits and having them summon 3 spirits that maybe just do regular attacks or something, I think would be plenty to kind of satiate that, you know, desire to have those teal colored spirits in there, you know. And for traits, so I kind of thought that the way that you get those skills and the way that I kind of thought about how they work, it would be interesting again to have 3 distinct lines again. I think having a top line that deals with pure damage, a middle line that deals with healing, and a bottom line that deals with condition would really work, because you have so many different utilities pretty much, because you have ashes that get different skills, and then you have a spirit that heals, and you have spirit weapons that affect your allies. So I think having something that deals with different things would be interesting, and there's a lot of things they can do, because the Ritualists in Guild Wars 1 were always able to do all kinds of different things. Like I said, they can be healers, they can be damage dealers, they do have a lot of hexes that they can use in Guild Wars 1 as well, a lot of things that deal damage over time and stuff. So I think having 3 distinct lines that just kind of improve certain things like healing, damage, and condition, again, you know, I always aim for that, because that's something that I wish most specializations did, and I know it doesn't work for every specialization, but I think for this one it does work. And for the last item, I wanted to get into, I know we've been talking so long already, but wanted to get into the mechanic. Now the mechanic would be like a tool belt. So for the engineer, we have a tool belt that, depending on what your utility skills and your healing skill and elite skill are, that's the extra little skills that kind of, they do the similar effects, but they do them on like a smaller scale. They don't do them as heavily, they're not as strong. So I'm thinking maybe something like that. So you could, for example, get an ashes skill where you hold an ash, like the ashes of someone in an urn, but it's a really short duration and maybe only gives you 1 skill that you can use, and then maybe give you another spirit, you know, kind of like how we have recuperation and rejuvenation, but it doesn't last long. It's just really short, like a 5-second, you know, that maybe does like a couple of heals or something like that. And then maybe a spirit weapon that is a lot weaker and doesn't last as long, maybe just for like 1 attack, you know, maybe like 5 seconds or something. So you don't, so it's not super overpowered, but you still get even more flair of the Ritualist class. So, you know, I think the Ritualist class is just so interesting, and I think that the Revenant has the ability to really incorporate this class into it, you know, as a specialization. With Togo and going to Cantha, the engineer was supposed to kind of take that place for the Ritualist, you know, with its turrets and stuff like that. But the problem with it is that the Ritualist had this very specific flair to it. You know, you get that teal color, and you have the blindfolds, you know, and they move a certain way, and they get, you know, they close their eyes in combat, and it was, I think that's what made the class, really, was the flair to it, was the way that it used its skills and the way that the skills looked. And I think really the Revenant has the ability to go back by invoking, maybe not Master Togo, maybe some other, because I know we're talking about having different races as legends that you use. Like we've had all different kinds of races, and we haven't had a Tengu, but I can't think of a Tengu Ritualist that was very dominant in Cantha or factions. They might go that way because that's something we don't invoke, and I know a lot of people have been asking for Tengu. So maybe if we don't get the class, maybe invoking a Tengu Ritualist would be interesting, but I think most people want Master Togo, and so. But that's all I have for this specialization. I know this was a lot longer than most of them, but there's just a lot to talk about. So if you guys have any suggestions or any ideas, please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.